Welcome to the DEFCON Warning System Digest. Tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a roundtable where I and a couple of panelists will be talking about items that have been in the news, including the Ukraine war and a couple of other things that kind of dovetail into that or with that. So we plan to do this all in video, but one of our panelists doesn't have a webcam, so we're just going to slap some pictures up there and you can kind of figure out who's talking based on the voices and things like that. But hopefully if this catches on and you guys like it, then we'll do more of these and hopefully we'll be doing it more of these in video. But with no further ado, here we are with the roundtable discussion. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the DEFCON Warning System Digest podcast. This is the first time we're doing something like this, so if we kind of stumble over each other, we kind of don't sound like we know what we're doing, well, we kind of don't know what we're doing. But if this is something that you find interesting, please do leave a comment down in the comment section, because we live and die by our comments. You know, we kind of know that we're making connections to everyone, so and that we're kind of hitting the right notes with you. So if you like this, let us know that you like it, and we'll do more of these. And if you don't like it, we won't do more of these. So there you are. As you know, I'm Tom Lonelywolf. I'm the director of the DEFCON Warning System. Sitting to my right and across the country is Eric Wasson. Did I pronounce that right? Wasson?
You did.
Wonderful. One of those pronunciations was correct. He is the deputy director of the DEFCON Warning System, and if I die, he will be taking over the entire system. He has the keys to everything. Fortunately, he's across the country, so he can't do anything to me. And of course, across the pond, we have Billy Auger, who is a staff member of the DEFCON Warning System. Hopefully,
pip, pip, cheerio.
Cheerio, pip, pip, cheerio. Normally I wasn't going to invite him to do this because they canceled Doctor Who, but they brought it back, so I'm now allowing him back in the show. So
glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so,
Priorities.
There you go. That's actually a joke I did when I worked at Disneyland. I asked, is anybody here from outside the country? And he goes, yes, I'm from England. Oh, you canceled Doctor Who. Get out. So that always got a laugh from them, if anything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around in a circle. We each have a subject we're going to talk about, and we're each going to give our opinions on it. And then we're all going to kind of leap in. So it's going to start a little bit organized, then get a little bit chaotic, and we'll see how this goes. If you have any suggestions on how we should do this, please do let us know. So what I want to bring up is what's been in the news recently is obviously the war in Ukraine. There's been a lot of controversy over this war, a lot about, the material that's being sent over, but, why is the West involved in what is a fairly limited war between Russia and Ukraine? Why does the West bother with it, especially with a nuclear state like Russia, who has come out and said that they are willing to defend their territory with nuclear weapons? Now we've seen battles in Donetsk and everything like that, and Russia has made nuclear threats, but they've made no move to use nuclear weapons. But now Crimea is a different story, and it is widely believed, and the DEFCON warning system certainly believes, that if Ukraine makes movements to actually start securing parts of Crimea, especially that warm water port, Russia will use nuclear weapons to defend. Maybe not Crimea itself, but that warm water port. That is their only warm water port. They need that. They are not going to give that up, and they will use nuclear weapons. So why does some guy in Chicago have to potentially sacrifice himself for some guy in Kiev? Why should he care? Why is the United States? Why is England? Why is Germany? Why are these countries bothering themselves when there is a risk of nuclear war? And the reason that the West is getting so involved in that is because of what has changed in Russia. Vladimir Putin has said that he is looking to expand the Russian Empire. Now, this is a change for Vladimir Putin. Long time ago, he very famously said that anyone who misses the old Soviet Union has no heart, but anyone who wants the old Soviet Union back has no mind. This is changed now. He's now looking to expand the Soviet Union. He wants to bring back the old Soviet Empire. Donald Trump said that the Vladimir Putin of today is not the Vladimir Putin of years ago. Vladimir Putin's getting older. He's missing the old glory days, and he's looking to expand not only Ukraine, but after Ukraine, he's specifically said that he's looking at NATO countries, Poland and Norway, and expanding out to the old Soviet Union countries, which are now NATO countries. Now, what do you do if you allow Russia to obtain Ukraine? What is to stop them from moving on to a NATO country? Because you've already seen that NATO is willing to roll over and let them have Ukraine. Once NATO has been seen to roll over to that, what is to stop Russia from moving on to Poland? Because nuclear weapons do work. They have stopped NATO from going into Ukraine. So what would stop? Why would NATO use nuclear weapons to defend Poland or Norway or any other of these countries that are under threat of an expansionist Russia / Soviet Union? So the idea is to stop Russia now before they make a move onto a country where the United States and NATO have no choice but to defend those countries militarily and with nuclear weapons. So that's why the West is moving into Ukraine so much right now, because it's to prevent a bigger war later by stopping Russia now, by saying, here's the line now. If we're willing to do this for Ukraine now, just think what we're willing to do for a country that we're obligated to by treaty to defend. So does this threaten this theoretical person in Chicago or San Francisco or something like that? Yeah, especially if we move into Crimea and defend that. But the thinking is you do it now because the threat will certainly come later. Now, some people believe that Russia would never use nuclear weapons. That even if we move into Crimea and take that warm water port, the possibility of this exploding into a full-scale nuclear war is just too great that Russia will back down. Vladimir Putin is crazy enough to not back down. There are certain lines in the sand. We know Russia will go to town to defend what they consider to be their territory. We saw a very bloody fight for St. Petersburg in World War II. If we don't think that Russia won't defend that warm water port, which they absolutely need, I think that you really don't know Russia well. So that's why I'm trying really hard not to push for a policy, because the DEFCON warning system doesn't push for policies, but this is the thinking of the West. This is why Ukraine is so important, why they're willing to risk some sort of war, because you got a small war now as opposed to a bigger, potentially nuclear war later, because this may turn into a nuclear war over Crimea. It will turn into a nuclear war for Germany or those other countries surrounding Ukraine, those NATO countries surrounding the area. Eric, you got anything on that?
Yeah, so you brought up, I picked up on three major points, at least on my end, and Billy may pick up on some others. So you covered, the average ordinary guy in Chicago. Why should he sacrifice his life for people in Ukraine? So that was one point you brought up. The other point you brought up is basically what we used to call in the old Cold War the domino effect. Back when the Soviet Union was trying to expand, if one country falls to communism, the next country will fall to communism. That was the big rallying cry back in the 60s. So the domino effect is what you were just describing. If we let them go into Ukraine, what's to stop them from going into Poland? And then you brought up, would somebody actually use nuclear weapons? So those are the 3 points, and I'll address each one very briefly. So why should Americans care about Ukraine? And I look at this from two standpoints. The first and the primary being that after the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1993, Ukraine became one of the major nuclear powers on the planet because of all the old Soviet nuclear missiles they had on their territory. And that was not considered very stable at the time. So in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum was signed by eventually 5 countries, but the initial 3 were the Russian Federation, the UK, and the United States. And basically, the Budapest Memorandum said all of our countries are going to agree that if the former Soviet states of Ukraine, Belarus, and I believe Kazakhstan were to give up their nuclear weapons and send them back to Russia, that the other countries would guarantee their existing borders as they existed right there in December of 1994. And all 3 countries agreed to that, and Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan honored their part of the agreement and gave up their nuclear weapons. So you fast forward to 2014, and Russia goes into Crimea. They violated that agreement, a contract. So they are in violation of a treaty back in 2014, as it was. And if we don't honor our treaty with Ukraine and honor their borders, what good is the NATO treaty at that point? What good is our treaty with Japan or Taiwan? We become a toothless tiger at that point. So that's part of my response to why Americans should carry it. It's kind of an honor thing. If we're going to be taken seriously as a world power, we need to keep our word. Go ahead.
Sorry, just expanding on your points there. I am in agreement there, but I don't think it's just Americans that need to worry about it. It's all NATO members. The power projection ability of NATO, the thing that makes it so strong is that we're able to put, or rather the United States and its allies are able to put forces into a wide variety of areas. Now, if we don't keep if the West doesn't keep NATO cohesion, and we let Russia pick off members one by one, then that reduces NATO's overall power and its power projection abilities. And I know that's based largely in naval warfare and carriers, but just in land-based power projection, we need to have a strong, unified NATO in order for the United States to be able to, A, project itself, and B, defend itself. So the reason Joe Schmo in Chicago should worry about this is not necessarily in the long term, but again, expanding on Riffrath's domino effect there, if NATO members start to go down because we don't care about Russia invading, because, oh no, we might risk a nuclear war, or not even NATO members, if we allow a bully to go and invade someone else's territory, because that's what Vladimir Putin is. He's a bully. Remember, there was that long stretch back in COVID where he was isolated from all his advisors. He barely saw anyone. So it's like a Twitter echo chamber inside his head. And he was just thinking about he was just thinking NATO's weak over and over in his head. And he was thinking, I can get away with this. I can do this. And so we're trying to deter him. We're trying to say, no, you can't do this. Snap back to reality. You can't. So we're just trying to give Putin a proverbial kick up the backside and remind him that NATO is strong, it's unified, and you cannot bully us into submission.
Yeah, and then I would argue it goes beyond NATO, because we have other countries watching us, and I'm going to refer specifically to China and North Korea. If they see the United States is not willing to back up their obligations to European partners, then they're going to get the idea that we're not going to back up our military obligations to Taiwan and South Korea. And so the domino effect expands globally at that point, way beyond Russian Federation borders and European borders. Because I guarantee you, China and North Korea are watching this to see exactly how far we'll let Russia go, and they're going to base their strategic decisions on how we react.
Well, what about the argument that, it's not Russia being a bully so much, it's that it's responding to NATO expansion. I mean, you look at the NATO map, it's gobbled up a lot of former Soviet states, Romania, Bulgaria, there's Ukraine, who's trying to become a NATO member, Poland,
That's true.
Russia has Russia has an ingrown, almost genetic fear of being invaded because they've had a big old bullseye on them for centuries. Yes. And when they see an enemy, NATO, encroaching on their territory, they're naturally going to react. Now, the old Soviet Union, they had these other countries as buffer countries. The Soviet states were there to protect Russia itself from being invaded by the West. And let's not pretend that the West is some angel. These countries are there. All of Europe is there to protect the United States from being invaded itself. That whole area, I'm sorry, Great Britain. I'm sorry, Billy. You're there to take the brunt of the war, so it doesn't come over to the United States. This whole area is a battleground. So Russia looks at this as NATO encroaching on them, not Russia encroaching on the West. So that's kind of where they're seeing this.
Well, here's my response to that. First of all, invade and conquer other countries. Other countries apply to NATO, and NATO says, yes, you can join, or no, you can't. It's completely voluntary. Nobody is forced to join NATO. Number two, to my knowledge, NATO has absolutely no history of invading anybody in Europe. It has been strictly a defensive organization from its conception. And the third thing I would say is there is a myth going around, some misinformation, that at some mythical point in time, the United States made some assurance to Russia that NATO would not expand its borders, and that has never been agreed upon by anybody. So we're kind of comparing apples to oranges by Russia is expanding through force. I'm not going to deny that NATO has been expanding, but they have not been doing it by force. There's a huge difference there.
Okay, I'm gonna take issue with the whole idea, and I'm sorry if I'm walking on you, Billy. I think you want to say something. But I'm gonna take issue with the idea that NATO has never invaded anybody. I mean, sure, there's never been an actual military invasion in the classic sense, but NATO has poked its nose into things. Bosnia and hers. I'm never gonna pronounce the name of that country right, so I'm sorry, you people in Herzegovina. I'm just gonna get that wrong. Please forgive me, but NATO poked its nose in there.
Baltic states.
Yeah, Baltic states, Serbia and Kosovo.
States, yes.
There's a whole bunch of NATO has not sat back and passively just watched the world go by. So
that's true, but those are still peacekeeping actions, not invasions.
Well, peacekeeping, a lot of people who live there, I mean, they're not exactly fans of KFOR. I know there is some people who like it, but there are some people who really don't like it.
Now, who the Feldercarb defines what a peacekeeping operation is? Russia could say that the whole thing in Ukraine is a peacekeeping operation. Let's not throw that phrase around like it means anything.
Well, I get your point, but I'm still making the distinct difference that there is a distinct difference between the use of force that Russia has thrown into Ukraine and the types of force that you're describing with Baltic states. I mean, you're talking about NATO maybe sending in, a few thousand troops versus Russia's 250,000.
Okay, so Billy, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Well, to be honest, I'm kind of in agreement with Eric here. I know they think, oh no, there's NATO slowly encroaching on our borders. But to be perfectly honest, NATO has the ability to strike anywhere in Russia with nuclear weapons and completely decimate their country. And the Russians can do the same with us. So it really doesn't make much strategic difference if we're really encroaching up on their borders. I mean, it's only a matter of minutes. And when you consider submarines that you can launch from them, it doesn't make that much difference, to be perfectly honest. So the only reason you would view NATO encroachment as a destruction of Russia is you're not thinking clearly, which Putin obviously isn't.
Okay, there we go. Next up, Eric is going to talk about the very controversial subject of surviving nuclear war. It can be done.
Yes, it can. So, and I've been studying nuclear war since the 80s, since the Reagan era. And almost every conversation I have with somebody, if the conversation goes to a full global nuclear exchange, usually it's envisioned between the United States and Russia. almost verbatim, the response I get is, "Yeah, I just want to be at ground zero and be vaporized because I don't want to die off from radiation sickness and starvation and disease." And it's kind of a straw man argument with that response to me. You're setting up yourself that there is a strictly that your only two options are to die instantly or to die in misery later. And the concept that you can't survive long term doesn't even become an option to discuss. And so there are a lot of myths out there regarding nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons effects. And the first of those is the old nuclear winter concept that came up during the 70s. And I will admit, the scientists, Carl Sagan, who I greatly admired, they came up with this theory, and they had the best of intentions. I give them that. But they were using old data based on old style nuclear strategy. And the weapons of the 60s and 70s are not the nuclear weapons we have today. Targeting technology that existed in the 60s and 70s is not the targeting technology we have today. So back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, larger multi-megaton weapons were pretty much the norm because targeting was not exact, and so if you were off by a mile or more, you wanted enough bang to still affect your target. And so they had 5 megaton, 10 megaton weapons that would wipe out not just a city, but an entire county. Those are largely obsolete now. We don't really have anything, at least in the United States, we don't have anything much higher than a 1 megaton weapon in active service. And the other thing is that just about any target, with the exception of a hardened target, such as our nuclear silos and, say, NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain, those targets are going to be hit with ground bursts, and that's going to kick up a lot of radioactive fallout into the atmosphere. I grant that. However, the secondary and tertiary targets, which are going to be cities, those are all going to be air bursts. And with today's nuclear weapons, which average around 250 to 500 kilotons, depending on who you're talking about, those are going to be airburst. The fireball is not going to touch the ground, and the nuclear fallout is going to be extremely minimal. It'll be a little bit. So those two pieces of information are extremely critical. The first being that we no longer have the multi-megaton, what they used to call city busters, in play. And the second being that most of the targets, both in Russia and the United States, are going to be hit with air bursts, and the entire country is not going to become a radioactive wasteland like you see in some of the apocalyptic movies. That's just not going to happen. There will be some strips here and there where it's not safe, but generally speaking, that's not going to be the case. If you live 50 miles from any strategic target, if you get any fallout at all, the hard radiation is going to dissipate to safe levels within a week or two. And I don't want to make it sound like you can just crawl out of your bunker and go back to living life as normal. That's not going to happen. But it's going to be safe to come out. It's going to be largely safe to hunt game and drink water. There'll just be some precautions that you have to take. Radiation kits telling you where some hot spots are, things like that. Having some medical supplies and stored food and stored water to get you by for a little while until it becomes safe again. So that's the key, is doing a little bit of proper planning and educating yourself. Where are you in relation to a major target? Now, if you live in downtown Chicago or downtown New York, and you're there when a hot war breaks out, yeah, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to make it. I grant that. But if you pay attention, the concept of a surprise first strike from, say, Russia to the United States or United States to Russia is pretty much not a valid scenario anymore. They don't think that's the way that you're going to have some warning, kind of like what we're seeing in Ukraine. Threats are being made, and we had warning. We had 6 months warning that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. We knew that was coming 6 months before it happened. So if you're paying attention, you can get out of the city before a hot war breaks out. And once you're 50 miles out, you should, for the most part, be pretty safe. So educating yourself, determining where your targets are, and taking some proper preparations as far as where do you go, having a few weeks to a month's worth of food and water supplies stored up would greatly increase your odds of surviving even a full-scale exchange. Now, it's not a guarantee. I'm not going to come out and say that if you do A, B, C, and D, you will survive a nuclear war. That's not going to happen. But I will say, if you do A, B, C, and D, your odds of surviving a nuclear war go up drastically.
Billy.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that to an extent. Now, nuclear winter, Carl Sagan, I think he might have fiddled around with the numbers. Maybe not on purpose. I mean, modeling wasn't anywhere near as accurate as it is today. I think we get something more similar to like the year without summer. Now, in 1816, there was a huge volcanic eruption, and it caused very small temperature decreases by no more than a Fahrenheit worldwide, or half a degree Celsius. But that led to crop failures. And now imagine you're facing crop failures mixed with the destruction of infrastructure and farming equipment from a nuclear war. That's going to lead to mass famine. So it's not going to be easy living after a nuclear war, but it is possible if you prepare properly, as Eric was saying.
Yeah, correct.
And another one. Sorry, you were saying.
Go ahead.
So there is the small chance of a surprise nuclear attack with no warning, because like in 1983, on the 26th of September, Stanislav Petrov, the commander of one of the early warning systems, they detected 5 missiles, and he decided not to launch because it turned out to be a computer error. That is possible. It's possible that at any moment, I know this is going to keep you up at night, but don't
Absolutely,
worry.
yeah. Now, that's a different topic. Yeah, you're talking about an accidental nuclear war.
Exactly. That is possible.
I agree with you. Yeah, for 70 years, we have always lived 30 minutes away from nuclear destruction because of accidents. I get that.
Well, 3 minutes in the UK's case.
Yeah. You guys are.
Yeah, we're screwed.
And you have bad weather.
Yeah.
We appreciate the sacrifice from over here in the colonies. Thank you. But you're correct. It's not going to be easy. But again, if you're going to go from a mass distribution of food society to subsistence living, you're going to have to know what plants are safe to eat around in your area. You're going to have to know how to hunt, fish, and trap. You're going to have to know how to plant a garden. So yeah, absolutely. But that's what I'm talking about with some basic education and basic preparation. It doesn't take a lot to plant a garden to feed a family. So there'll be massive crop failures, yes. Will there be mass starvation? Probably. But if you're prepared for it, and you can plant your own small family garden, then that mass crop failure is not going to affect you as badly.
Oh, I forgot to say, after the initial detonation, something called homolytic free radical substitution will happen in the upper stratosphere, which means you're going to have a massive reduction in the ozone layer. You're going to have huge holes, which means you're going to see a huge uptick in UV radiation over the coming years, after a nuclear attack, which is going to stay around for maybe up to 100 years, although we don't know the numbers on that. It's hugely variable. Yeah. So you are going to see massive increases in cancer rates of all different types of cancers, which unfortunately, and also you'll see lots of birth defects as well.
Yeah, you probably will. Again, we're talking about, for instance, I'm 56 years old now. Without a nuclear war, I stand a really good chance to live to be 80 or 85 or possibly even longer. if we have a nuclear war, I'm under no illusions that I probably wouldn't make it past 65 because of everything you mentioned.
Exactly.
However, that's still an additional 10 years where, I'm with my family, I'm interacting with my neighbors, we're taking care of each other, and I don't want to sound cliche, because this is extremely cliche, but we're rebuilding society at that point. So yeah, I'm under no illusions that life would return normal and that life expectancy would not be massively impacted. But it's not going to be an extinction level event the way that a lot of people portray it.
Exactly.
People will survive. There will be some people out there who are just naturally more resistant to radiation than others. Chernobyl proved that. So there will be survivors. It's a question of, are you prepared for it? And are you educated enough about what's around you to be among those who survive?
Do you have anything to add, Tom?
Yeah, we published an article called "You Can Survive Nuclear War," and in that article, we actually mathed out how much debris would be put in the atmosphere from a nuclear war. Now, these nuclear winter scenarios that a lot of the researchers come out with, as Eric pointed out, they're wildly off base, off target when it comes to irony, when it comes to exactly how the bombs would be used. Surface bursts are old school. Nobody in their right mind uses a surface burst anymore unless you're a terrorist who can't get it up in the atmosphere, or unless you're trying to dig out a target like NATO, or in Cheyenne Mountain.
Missile silos.
Yeah, NORAD. I meant NORAD, not NATO. I'm still thinking the last subject we were talking about, or those missile silos in the missile fields. Most of them are going to be airbursts. So we actually mathed out how much soot would actually be put into the atmosphere, not counting the fires that would be started in the cities. And we took the middle range bombs. So what we did is we used larger than would probably be used in a war, but smaller than what we have available to us. We used a full-scale nuclear war, and we envisioned more surface bursts than there would be normally. And we came up with the amount of soot being in there being less than what Mount St. Helens put out. Now, Mount St. Helens was a localized event that spread out across the world, whereas a nuclear war would be spread out across the world. So it would certainly be different. And there's definitely going to be survivability issues because, Mount St. Helens didn't put out a bunch of radioactive feldercarb. But it would spread about across the world. It's not going to be like On the Beach, where that movie where the radiation just never went down and spread down to Australia or something like that and eventually killed areas. It's not going to be nothing like that.
Mad Max, I think you think of.
No, there's a movie called On the Beach. It was just on the beach. It was just on TMC the other day, or it's coming on next week or something like that.
Are you talking about the remake or the original? Which one did you
The original's coming on. The original.
Okay, yeah, there was a remake.
I've seen them. I've seen them both.
Yeah, but I agree with you. The whole on the beach scenario where radiation just spreads throughout the entire atmosphere and kills everybody on the planet is a complete myth. It's not going to happen.
So
I'm studying physics and I can attest to that.
Yeah, let me give this out to the listeners, the viewers, that unless you're in a city, your odds of surviving the initial salvo of World War III are actually pretty good. You're probably gonna survive the initial attack. Yeah. It's the radiation that's gonna get you. And the radiation can be survived if you have a shelter, and you can build a shelter for pretty cheap. There's a book out there called Crescent Kearney's Nuclear War Survival Skills. It'll show you how to build a shelter on the cheap that anyone can do in any kind of home. And you can survive. And you just need supplies to do it, because a shelter without supplies is not a shelter but a tomb. And if you survive that initial nuclear attack, and now you're looking at the radiation, and you have no shelter or you have no supplies, what are you going to do when your family turns to you and says, why didn't you prepare? Why don't we have protection? And dying from radiation is one of the worst deaths you can ever face. Being burned alive is the worst. This is up there. It's a miserable, horrible death. And unless you're in that city and you got vaporized or just burned in the firestorms, you're not ready, you're looking at a really bad ending. So you don't want this. So you can survive. And you just need to prepare, and you can prepare. It's easy. Just go to the store. I know prices are high right now, but just take one little thing, just one little can of that frozen, that flash frozen long-term survival food that lasts for 30 years. Just get one of those every time you go to the store. Just get some paper towels. On the next trip, get some bathroom tissue. On the next trip, get some toothbrushes. On the next trip, get some more food. And over time, you'll be surprised how much you have over time. I've done this, and I've got like a lot. I'm not going to say how much I have, and I'm not going to say where I'm at because I don't want you coming to get it. But I've been doing this for years, and it just builds up and builds up and builds up. And you need more. You need more than you think, because last month we had a lot of snow. My plow truck broke down. I couldn't get up to my house because I live on a hill that my car couldn't get up, and I was stuck up here, so I was going into my supplies, and my supplies went down a lot faster than I thought they would. So I need to build it up more. So get your supplies. Get your supplies.
I was going to make one comment on the supplies whenever you're ready.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. When we're talking about supplies, there's also a common misconception. Well, I'm going to get a month worth of supplies, and that'll last me a month, and then I can go hunt and fish and all that. And that's not the correct way to handle it. Your stored supplies are mostly a transitional supply. So when you get halfway through whatever you have stored up, you should already be out hunting, fishing, harvesting nuts and berries, and planting seeds for a farm. You don't wait until your supplies are all used up to make that transition. That's a common misconception.
Yeah, that's wise.
Also, if you're living in a high fallout area, it's probably best if you dig up the first couple of meters of topsoil and then chuck those over, then plant in it. Just to try and minimize the amount of radioactive material that's going into your food.
And that's where a radiation detector would come in very handy.
A Geiger counter will come in handy there. Because really nasty isotopes like strontium, which I'm going to talk about just in a minute, your body thinks it's calcium, so it puts it into your bones, and then in like 5 years' time, you get leukemia. So it's not very nice.
Fallout does not irradiate food. If your supplies were not irradiated by the initial ionizing blast, it is safe. All you got to do is just brush the fallout off, wash it off, or whatever, and your food is safe. Your banana, just peel the banana. Your tin food is just fine. Just open the tin and it's all good. Your food is safe.
It's like some companies actually irradiate food to kill the bacteria on them. So I can guarantee you it's safe to eat irradiated food. They've been irradiated with gamma.
And for water itself, unless you're talking about nuclear reactors, which you're going to be much better at this than I am, water itself cannot become radioactive from fallout. It's the particles inside water that are radioactive. So if you filter your water, the water will not be radioactive.
If you put neutron radiation into water, you can create tritium. But I mean, the concentration of neutrons, you'd literally have to have it right under a neutron bomb.
Well, again, that comes from if you miss the initial ionizing blast, you're going to be okay. Whatever it is okay.
Riff Raff's right on this.
Yeah. So next up, Bill is going to talk about terrorism. See, I knew I was just trying to form the word. He's going to talk about nuclear terrorism, which is something that we do have to live with, and I'm surprised yet.
So am I, to be honest. Well guarded. Like, you can't just stroll in there and steal some highly radioactive waste. But I think that is the main concern. We should be more concerned about radiological attacks than nuclear attacks. Because remember, to do a nuclear attack, you need to have highly enriched uranium, like 90% plus. It's insane. And in order to make highly enriched uranium, you need a whole host of nuclear engineers. You have to convert it to uranium hexafluoride from yellow cake. You have to smuggle it in through the borders without them detecting you. You have to hide from loads of intelligence agencies. You need millions upon millions of pounds or dollars. You need a well-organized setup, and you just can't hide that from government. So to make a nuclear weapon, you either need state support or you need to steal it from, like, I don't know, Pakistan, probably the easiest to steal from. No offense to Pakistan, no offense. But like countries like North Korea, they might try and supply enriched uranium to a country. Then again, that enriched uranium can actually be traced back to the specific centrifuge it was made in. So they might be a bit hesitant. I don't know. That might happen in the future. Or like there's, I don't know, somehow uranium might get onto the black market. I don't know. But no, the thing you need to be more concerned about is a radiological attack. So that's some guy goes and finds a nuclear waste dump. Because not all, I can't speak for the security of all of them worldwide. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of them, where governments from previous generations have dumped waste without thinking about it, and they haven't put up security. So like in Kazakhstan, you can actually walk into farmers' fields and go and dig up radioactive waste. Yeah. So
Lovely.
all you need is some guy with a shovel, a bucket, and a GPS and a map, and a hazmat suit, and someone who knows how to deal with metals and explosives and things. They just need to go and find some radioactive material, preferably a gamma emitter because they're nasty to deal with, like cesium-137. They need to smuggle it across the borders, which if you put enough lead in it, you can do that. Strap it to a few pounds of C4, put it in a van, and then go to the center of a well-populated area. And you could potentially kill, a few hundred, maybe, from radiation poisoning, and kill thousands long-term from cancers. So it's rather a nasty thing to do, but it would certainly be desirable for terrorists. And I think that's what we need to be more concerned about. Nuclear attacks from terrorists, it's much harder to make a gun-type assembly. Although you don't need an initiator, you just need the uranium. You need to be able to cast it into like an empty cylinder in a rod shape, and you fire it down a gun barrel. Like with Little Boy, exactly like Little Boy. So it is possible, but it's much, much harder. The reason it hasn't happened yet is because if an intelligence agency found out about it, they would be down on it like a ton of lead bricks. Those terrorists' feet would not touch the ground. It's super difficult.
That's interesting.
Well, the United States is a prime target for this kind of attack. Not only because it's the world's bullseye, but also because it has these wide open borders that you could just sneak anything through. That they're completely uncontrolled. I'm surprised that, like I said earlier, I'm surprised this hasn't been done. It's just too easy. The United States now has pretty much an open border policy because for political reasons they want these people to come in, and so they're just not vetting them. They're just not making no efforts. They actually, Arizona was actually building a wall that the federal government forced them to take down because for political reasons. And if you're not going to have they're just letting themselves open to this kind of attack. The fact that it hasn't happened yet, has lulled people into this idea that it's never going to happen. And with countries like Iran and North Korea and now Russia. Russia now has pretty good incentive to sneak something in. We all saw not by Dawn's Early Light, but Some of All Fears. That was a movie about that. And if you read the book, the movie was about the Fourth Reich was trying to start a war between Russia and the United States. That's not what happened in the book. In the book, it was Russia who was trying to do it, if I remember correctly. So, the United States is kind of setting itself up for this, and politically, it may not be politically what expedient for what one party wants to do to close the borders because for some reason they want it open, but because just for their own safety they need to control these borders just to prevent this kind of material from sneaking in if it hasn't already snuck in already. I think that it hasn't snuck in already simply because they should have done it already. But why bring it in and then sit on it? Just go ahead and do it. Just because a terrorist attack is not really. It's not a military. There's no military advantage to it. It's psychological warfare. So maybe if the United States got more involved on Israel's side, maybe someone like Iran might want to detonate one, or the Palestinians, or whatever. Or maybe if the United States got more involved in Crimea. Maybe Russia might want to, but then that would I don't think Russia would do it, because that would just be an invitation for the United States to retaliate.
Yeah, because the US would be able to trace it back to the centrifuges it was made in. They'd know it as Russia.
Right, but certainly Iran wouldn't have any compunction. North Korea certainly wouldn't have any compunction against doing that. So the United States really does need to control its borders, not as a policy thing for political reasons, but just to prevent this kind of thing from going in.
The thing is, though, even if you built a huge border wall, you can't check every single shipping container that comes into the United States. I mean, there's millions of them.
No, but I'm not advocating. This is the position of advocating that because you can't catch them all, you should catch none of them. And that was the same ridiculous argument that was used against Ronald Reagan in Star Wars. Because Star Wars wouldn't catch every single missile, because 1 in 5 would get through, we shouldn't do it at all. I reject that argument wholesale.
Okay,
I mean,
I've got nothing against putting your Geiger counters in ports and all that, but I mean, there's got to be sort of a cost versus likelihood of detection thing set up.
Well, if I'm going to sneak into the United States with a nuclear weapon, I'm not going to come in through the port or through a port or across the Mexican border. I'm going to come in from the north across Canada's border, because that is basically wide open space and almost impossible to protect. All you have to do is walk.
Yeah, Canada's border is much more porous.
Yeah, so if I'm a terrorist, I'm not coming in through the ports. I'm not coming in across the south border. I'm going to get into Canada, and I'm just going to walk across into Montana.
But then there's the whole thing about being able to get into Canada in the first place. First, you have to get the material into Canada and then into the United States. It's a lot easier to get it into Mexico.
I mean, you could find the material in Canada, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But also, another thing to note.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Uranium's like 4 times denser than lead, so it's a very heavy metal. So
it is.
You can't exactly carry it just with one hand.
So 2 things I want to touch on real quick. You brought up Sum of All Fears, which is great, because I was going to bring that up anyway. I read the book, and the book was infinitely better than the movie. The movie just did not do the book justice. But if you do read the book, at the end, there is an afterword by Tom Clancy, where he goes into his horror at how easy it was for him in his research. He devotes it in entire chapters to construction and detonation of this terrorist device. And he was horrified at how easy it was for him to obtain all the information he needed to build this device. And he says in that afterword that in his book, he deliberately altered some of the details because he didn't want a terrorist being able to read his book and learn how to build a nuclear device. It's that easy. Now, the hard part, like Billy has brought up, is obtaining the nuclear material. But building the device is not that hard.
I do take issue with you there. You have to be very precise with your metalworking. You need to be an expert at dealing with metals and alloys. You need to know what you're doing. I agree.
Yeah,
your math has to be exact.
Yes. No, I'm not saying that your average farmer can go out and do this, but if you've got a couple of guys who have machining experience and some basic physics, and we've had the blueprints. We've had the blueprints for a gun-style nuclear device for 70 years. That's the simplest one for them to build, rather than the implosion type.
The implosion type is very difficult to do.
Yes, it is because of the timing. So I agree with you there. If there's going to be a nuclear device or a radiological device, a nuclear terrorist device. Not a radiological. It's going to be the gun type.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to touch on is you were right. A radiological terrorist attack is completely psychological. You're going to kill a few hundred, maybe 1,000 people. That's it. More people died in 9/11 than would probably die in a radiological attack. But it's going to put the fear of God into people because it's radiation.
Well, see, here is the problem with 9/11 as opposed to a nuclear terrorist attack. See, with 9/11, I'm not trying to critique the 9/11 attack and see how they could do it better. But it was a one-time event. So, and what it did is it had the opposite effect of what they wanted to happen. They wanted to terrorize the United States into doing whatever they wanted to do. And all it did was just piss off the United States, somehow it magically united the Democrats and the Republicans and got the United States to go kick some serious tail, so much that the terrorists were actually shocked at how bat-crap crazy the United States went over 9/11, and they lost two countries out of it. What a nuclear terrorist would do is, here I am seemingly giving advice now, is you have one detonate, and then you come out and say, okay, now I have another one someplace else, and if you don't do what I tell you to do, we're going to detonate the second one. This is the same strategy the United States did in World War II to Japan. Here's Hiroshima. Look what we did to Hiroshima. Now we're going to do it to you again if you don't surrender. And Japan said, we don't believe you. We don't think you have another one. Okay, there went Nagasaki. And the United States came back and said, okay, now we've done Nagasaki. If you don't surrender, we're going to do this to you again. And Japan said, oh man, we better surrender. The funny thing was, the United States actually didn't have another one ready. So that third one was a bluff. But that's what's going to happen, or at least that's what probably or should happen for a nuclear terrorist, is not just have one, but have a second one ready to go, just like the movie Unthinkable. I think that's what it was, where this guy had like 4 terrorist bombs ready to go off, and then the fifth one. To be clear,
you're talking about you're actually talking about a nuclear device, not a radiological.
Yeah, we were talking about radiological.
I'm talking about nuclear terrorism, which a radiological device would fall under.
Right, okay.
We could be technical and say, okay, this is nuclear and this is radiological and this is biological. Who cares? It's a terrorist device that involves radiation. Let's just call it a nuclear device. Let's not be pedantic about it.
Thorium dioxide for sale on eBay the other day. Thorium dioxide for sale on eBay. I know it's an alpha emitter and it's not exactly brilliant, but you can actually it's not too difficult to obtain this stuff compared to uranium-235.
No, it's not. I mean, your household smoke detectors contain
americium-241.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's that nuclear Boy Scout from the 70s who built a breeder reactor in his garage. If you Google that, Google nuclear Boy Scout, and that's a great story.
Yeah. If you strapped a pound of C4 to that, you'd have a lot of people with cancer.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, well, you know what? This actually went on a lot longer than I expected to. I thought it was just going to be 15, 20 minutes. We just go around and here it is. And here we are approaching an hour. I can't believe we actually did this for an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the room, or I should actually say go around the world, and I'm going to give everybody one last word. So Eric, what do you want to say?
I want to say prepare. And it doesn't have to be just for nuclear war. If you make preparations for a tornado or a hurricane, you are essentially making the same preparations for a nuclear war. The only thing I would add to that is pick up a Geiger counter, a radiation detector for $30 to $50 off eBay, and add that to your supplies, which would be unique to a nuclear war. But otherwise, you're making the same preps for any other disaster, man-made or natural, that might affect your area. So my final word is just prepare yourself for anything.
Billy.
Mine is 2 words: stay tuned. Keep listening to the news, because that's your early warning system right there for you. Listen to us as well, please.
Yes.
Please, we beg you.
My last word is that you don't have to worry so much about nuclear war that you have to lose sleep over it. Just stay informed. Don't tune it out. Don't think it's the end of the world, because you can survive it. But don't obsess over it. It's our job to obsess over it. I think about this stuff all the time. 24 hours a day. I'm always thinking about nuclear war and things like that. That's my job. This is what I do. This is not. You don't need to worry about this. Just go and live your life and be happy. But as Eric said, be prepared, because You don't want to be out there and something happen and then you're not ready for it. And then you have to look at your family in their eyes and said, I could have done something about it and I didn't. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the DEFCON Warning System Digest podcast, Roundtable. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave notes in our comments, because this is how we're going to see if we're going to do any more of this. I know we had fun. It was a little kind of terrorizing because I get kind of stage fright and things like that. But if you liked it, let us know. If you didn't like it, let us know. If you want to see something different, let us know, because your feedback is very important to us. So in the meantime, for Eric Wasson and Billy Auger, I'm Thomas Lonely Wolf, the director of the DEFCON Warning System.